15 years after the end of World War II, Japan seemed like a nation recovered from the ashes of war. The nation had several free elections and an economy that was growing fast. But the crisis the country faced in 1960 would show that a great unease continued to lurk beneath the surface of prosperity. Back in 1955, the Liberal Democratic Party was founded. This party was an amalgamation of several right-wing factions, business interests, and bureaucrats. In 1957, following the resignation of Ishibashi Tanzan, Kishi Nobusuke was elected prime minister. Nobusuke had previously been held by the Americans as a Class A war criminal for his role in slave labor in the Japanese puppet state in Manchuria and his membership in the wartime cabinet. But this was the Cold War, and the U.S. went from punishing Japan to building the nation as a prosperous ally in the Pacific. The U.S.-Japan alliance was deeply unpopular with the left, especially with socialists and the Communist Party. If Japan was supposed to be a pacifist nation after World War II, why did they have to have such a large U.S. military presence, they asked. Events like the aggressive construction of military bases and the contamination of several fishermen with radioactive fallout from the Marshall Islands helped turn public opinion against the U.S. presence. The security treaty with the U.S., signed in January 1960 at the White House, was set to be renewed by the Japanese Diet in the summer of 1960, and large left-wing groups like the Communist Party and the Student Federation Zengakuren were prepared to demonstrate against the treaty. Starting in May 1960, Kishi was eager to force the treaty's ratification through Japan's National Diet, despite the opposition from the Japanese Socialist Party and the Communists. U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower was scheduled to visit, and the unpopular Kishi needed the good publicity. Using authoritarian tactics, Kishi had 500 police officers physically remove the socialists from the Diet building so he could force through the treaty. Massive protests ensued, with the Sohyo labor union leading the largest strike in Japanese history.
I don't want to go to war. I don't like war. And if that passes, if that law passes, or should I call it the bill, we Japanese, we young Japanese, we have to get to the front, to the battlefront. And we don't like that. I personally had been shot from an airplane when I was so small, knee-high. And I was a very small boy. I hadn't done anything against the world, and yet they had to shoot at me.
And you think that Japan... Whoa! Here come the rightists again. Here comes...
On June 10th, the car of Eisenhower's press secretary, James Hagerty, was mobbed by protesters, forcing him to be evacuated by Marine helicopter. Eisenhower canceled his visit shortly thereafter. Kishi was relying on right-wing thugs and Yakuza gangsters provided by his political allies for much of his security, leading to a large level of violence against the protesters. On June 15th, student activist Michiko Kanaba was beaten to death outside the Diet building. The protests only died down when Kishi was forced to resign on July 19th and was replaced by Ikeda Hayato, who announced a popular plan to double the national income. On October 12th of that year, in a televised debate with Prime Minister Ikeda, Socialist Party leader Asanuma Inejiro was assassinated by 17-year-old ultra-nationalist Yamaguchi Otoya when Yamaguchi charged the stage with his family's sword. The Pulitzer Prize-winning picture would become one of the most famous images of the 20th century.
選挙の際は国民の評判の悪い政策は全部捨てておいて選挙が多数を占めると
Later in the year, a short story was written by Fukazawa Shichiro, which depicted the death of the emperor. Ultranationalist fanatic Komori Kazutaka would later attempt to assassinate the publisher in another case of right-wing fanaticism. 1960 was the year which showcased the power and limitations of Japan's extreme left and right. The violence appalled many and led to the rise of a politics of consensus between political factions. By forcing Kishi to resign, the Liberal Democratic Party was able to keep Kishi's right-wing policies while disassociating themselves from his personal unpopularity, paving the way for decades of Liberal Democratic Party rule, which the growing middle class preferred to the left-wing parties. The Liberal Democratic Party continues to govern the country today, while the left, weakened by decades of electoral failure, continues to criticize U.S. influence in Japan. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and leaving a like.